Hello and welcome back to the Northern Forge. Today I'm going to be showing you how to forge some set down tongs. For this project we're going to need just a few things. I'm forging these out of 3/4 inch square bar. I also have a hot cut, a 1/4 inch punch, plus my hammer, tongs, and anvil as always. First I'm going to cut my starting material using the hot cut. You can do this ahead of time with an angle grinder or a bandsaw if you have one, but I wanted to show you how you can cut through thicker stock using the hot cut if you don't have access to those tools. You can see here every few blows I just rotate it around. That way I'm always cutting towards the middle and I don't end up with a big angle on the end that would need to be filed or ground down. This gives a much more even way to cut thicker material. And you can see that the hot cut does leave a little bit of roughness there at the middle of the bar where the cut breaks off. So I'm going to take this over to the vise, and then I use a rasp here, but you can also do this with just a rough cut file. And I'm just going to hot file that down to smooth off the end. This is one of the quicker ways to do it without power tools. Of course, you can also use an angle grinder, a bench grinder, a belt grinder, whatever you have available. Just clean that end up a little bit to prevent any issues further down the road. Now with the starting materials prepped, I'm going to go back over, take the first piece to the anvil, and I'm going to use the near edge of the anvil to forge in the first shoulder or set down. And this is actually where the process for making these kinds of tongs gets its name, because we're going to do 3 of these set downs on each side of the tongs. As I forge this down, you can see that it's going to spread out, it's going to get a little bit wider, so I'm going to periodically turn the piece 90 degrees and forge that width back down. Depending on what type of tongs you want to make, you might want this extra width, but for this project I'm making flat bit tongs, and so I want to keep that end nice and straight and the same thickness that I started with. Once the bit is forged, I'm going to rotate the piece 90 degrees and I'm going to move to the far edge of the anvil to do the next set down. Like I've said before in other tongs, it doesn't really matter which direction you rotate, but you do need to make sure that you stay consistent for at least both sides of the tongs. That way they end up the same so that they'll go together in the end. I recommend you try both directions, see which one you like. Some people have a preference. I've never really found it made much difference to me personally. This step often causes the bit to rotate a little bit as you forge down what will eventually become the boss. So you'll see that I bring the bit back up to the anvil periodically just to make sure that it stays straight through the process. It's a lot easier to correct it a little bit at a time as you go rather than trying to fix a big mistake towards the end. Now I'm going to jump over the power hammer and I'm going to forge down the rest of the 3/4 square into a flat bar about the same thickness as what I have for the boss here. Once the thickness is established, it's back over the anvil for the final set down. I rotate the piece another 90 degrees in the same direction as before, leaving it 180 degrees from where I started. And this is going to create the shoulder between the boss and the reins, and at this point you can really start to see that tong shape coming to. And now once the final set down is finished, I'm going to go back over to the power hammer and I can use that to finish forging out the reins the rest of the way. Now that the reins are forged out, it's back over the anvil so that I can round them out by hand. It's time to punch the hole in the boss so I can rivet the tongs together. As usual, I drive my punch in a little over halfway through the material, then flip it over and finish from the other side. One difference between this and the technique on the twist tongs that you've seen me make before is that on this one I just have to be able to work around that bit. So I've got to keep it near the edge of the anvil. It can sometimes make it a little harder to balance, but it's still very doable. And now repeat the process for the other half of the tongs. Now that I have the hole punched, it's time to make the pin. I'm going to start off with a bar of 1/2 inch square and forge down the end to about 1/4 inch, then forge it round. I'll test that against the hole in the tongs. Here it was a little bit too big, so I forged it down some more, repeat the process until it fits. While checking the fit, I did notice there was a little swell in the boss on both sides that prevented it from pivoting smoothly, so before putting it together, I'm going to bring both sides of the tong back to the anvil just to flatten that out a little bit. Now I have the pin size right. I'm going to take it to the Hardy Hot Cut and I'm going to cut the pin off 90% of the way just so that I still have a little bit of a handle to hold on to. I put the pin in, break the handle off, and then I'm going to use my rounding hammer to drive the pin down in to make a nice snug fit. After I flip it over, I noticed that the pin was a little bit too long, and that's not going to rivet down well. That's going to bend over. So I'm going to get the hot cut back out, and I'm going to cut some of that excess pin material off. You can probably see here, I was having some trouble keeping both sides in place while cutting it off. In hindsight, it would have made a lot more sense to have taken one side of these off and then cut the pin off, put it all back together, but I didn't think of that at the time, so I struggled with it a little bit. And with the pin cut off, I'm going to rivet down both sides using a ball peen hammer, and the tongs will be assembled. These tongs were pretty stiff after assembly, so the reins got a little bit bent while trying to break the pivot loose, but get there eventually, and once they're loose, they are nice and smooth, so I just have to adjust the reins back to where they belong. I tried adjusting the bit here on the anvil, but they weren't close enough together to hold the stock really securely, so everything was moving around a bunch. So I went over to the vise. I tried clamping the jaws down in the flat bar, but I was having trouble getting it to stay in because I only have 2 arms, not 3. And unfortunately my camera stopped recording in here, but basically what I ended up doing is I just used the vise to squeeze the jaws all the way together, and then I put the flat bar in after that and then clamp them down again. That way I can adjust the reins to the right position with the bit already on the stock. I cooled the tongs off in some oil just to lubricate them and protect them from rust, and these tongs are now ready to go. And you can see here these tongs have some pretty great grip strength. I've just got that little bit of 1/8 inch flat bar in there, and here in a second you can see I'm going to push down on this bar pretty hard with the hammer, and you can see that bar is bending. The tongs are not loosening up even a little bit. Once again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please like the video, subscribe to see more, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see me make next.